What is up, everybody? Well, tonight, 2024 comes to a close. So really quick before we turn the page to 2025, let's talk about the new releases that I saw in the month of December of 2024, of which I was able to check out 15 brand new releases. One of these was from Fantastic Fest last year. One of these was from Fantastic Fest this year. A number of these were for your consideration screeners that I got to check out. So got to watch quite a few movies this month. And this month was certainly a weird collection of movies too. But this is it. This is the final month wrap-up video. So once I add this to the playlist, you'll be able to watch the entire year in review of 2024. And then after New Year's, we will kick off all of the end of the year videos, the best and the worst of 2024, the most surprising and the most disappointing, ranking all of the horror films of 2024. And then finally, the big magnum opus that I always close off every year with, which is ranking every single new release that I have seen, of which right now I am at 127. Just reading that exhausts me. Anyway, with all that said, if you guys have seen any of these movies, let me know your ranking down below. If you want to add some that you have seen or take away some of the ones that you have not, give me your ranking of December 2024 down below. And with that, kicking off our list at number 15, the worst film that I saw this calendar month was easily Kraven the Hunter. And I didn't really expect anything less. Look, Kraven the Hunter is supposedly going to be the punctuation mark on this horrendous feat that Sony went out on to try to do a Spider-Man-less Spider-Man universe. It started off with the Venom film, which I actually enjoyed somewhat in theaters, but also have never had the desire to rewatch, so how much did I really enjoy it? And then the Venom sequels, Morbius, Madam Web, and then finally Kraven the Hunter before they have reportedly pulled the plug, or at least punted years into the future before they can reassess what is going on. So this is by far the worst thing to happen to comic book films over probably the last decade, honestly. Like, Marvel have had their slips. The DCEU certainly had a lot of insanity going on, a lot of pure incompetence from Warner Brothers, but they look like geniuses compared to what these guys at Sony have put together with this universe. And Kraven the Hunter was just another one of those movies, just an ill-fated idea that nobody was really asking for, and a stupid concept of putting a Spider-Man villain in his own film without Spider-Man there, that for most of these characters is what makes them interesting, is the rivalry and the mashup with Spider-Man himself. But Kraven the Hunter, I had a tiny glimmer, a tiny little note of hope, because they were going to be going hard R with the violence. It was going to be like this revenge movie. And I thought, hey, it's probably not going to make a whole lot of sense to do this movie standalone. They're probably going to cop out and make Kraven somewhat of an anti-hero versus an actual evil villain, which is another thing that they continuously do in this franchise. But hopefully it'll at least have some cool carnage, some cool action to make it at least an entertainingly bad film. And unfortunately, I just did not have that experience. I know a number of people that saw this at press screenings and saw it at packed theaters with a bunch of other critics and had an absolute blast where they were just laughing and roasting the movie the entire way through for its horrendous dialogue and its ridiculous situations and its hammy at best acting from Oscar-winning actors. But I was in a theater with like two other people who were about as amused as I was. So this was just a bad movie. Is it the worst thing I've ever seen? No. Is it going to be in my top 10 worst of the year? I don't know. It might get close if it's not on there, but you know, it's just another one of these movies. A movie where Sony thinks that we're all stupid, and as long as you tease or hint at Spider-Man being there, we're going to drop our money and go out in droves. Well, that might have worked for a while, but after the Venom sequels, after Morbius completely bait and switched us, and after the disaster earlier this year with Madam Web, people were just done, and this movie absolutely bombed, as it deservedly should, because it is one of the worst movies of the year. It's one of the worst comic book films ever made, and it is the worst film that I saw in December. Coming in at 14 is a movie that I imagine some other people will have much higher on their list for the year, and that is Nightbitch. This is a movie with Amy Adams that I really didn't know what it was about, but I heard a lot of whispers about it when I was at Fantastic Fest, people thinking it was going to be one of the secret screenings. And so I clicked on this one once my For Your Consideration screener started to come out. And essentially what this is you have a woman with a little bit of postpartum depression, a little bit of just depression in general about her place in life, where she has had a child and now her entire life is just based around being a mom, being a homemaker, staying at home, cleaning the house, cooking the meals, taking care of the kid, wash, rinse, repeat, almost like a hell version of Groundhog Day. And her kind of revolting against that, her seemingly having almost like these werewolf tendencies to like rediscover her primal female nature or something. I'm sure this movie went over my head a little bit with some of the things that it was talking about, because I'm not a woman. I did not give birth to a child, nor was I stuck at home doing the housewife thing. So there's certain things in here that are probably very effective in like a female empowerment form. But me, as well as my wife, did not get into this movie whatsoever. It's very odd. It's very strange. Amy Adams does a great job, and you could see that she, physically committed to the role. You could see that she gained weight for this. So, she's always great. But just the concept of the movie, the intended humor of the movie, it was just off-putting and odd to me. So this is one of those movies that I'm not necessarily saying it's a bad film. It's just absolutely not for me. And sticking with that, with number 13, we have Babygirl. And this is another one that started to get a lot of buzz here recently with Nicole Kidman and her getting a lot of nominations. And this is one of those affair kind of sexual thrillers. And so you have Nicole Kidman, who is this very successful businesswoman. She's married to Antonio Banderas. She's very sexually frustrated. And so she starts to have this very strange affair with this intern at work. And their entire sexual relationship is like basically based around domination. She wants to be treated almost like a dog. Like she literally gets on all fours and licks milk out of a saucer. And so it's a movie that kind of goes for a lot of those affair tropes where it's like, is she going to get caught? What's going to happen when the husband finds out? How deep will they go? But instead of it being like a frustrated housewife or being somebody that's just like at that rut in their marriage where they're not feeling the love, they're not feeling the sparks anymore, it's somebody who's an absolute sexual freak and just can't get her husband to understand that he's got to get a little freaky to satisfy her. Now, that side of things I thought was interesting because that's a very different angle to take. And in today's society where I feel like we've gotten strangely prudish about a lot of this stuff, I kind of appreciated that a movie was like, hey, some people are fucking freaks and you gotta entertain that freak side of them. Otherwise, they'll find somebody who will. And so that part of it I kind of found mildly entertaining, where Antonio Banderas is just very much like that stereotypical Latin lover and wants the passion and the love and wants the eye contact. And she's like, no, I want to be bent the fuck over and just railed into the side of the couch. So that side of it I thought was kind of entertaining. But in general, it's a movie that's just, affair movies aren't really my thing to begin with. And so I found it just to be odd. Their type of exploration of their affair is just very intentionally strange and different and freaky. So it was off-putting, but well made, well acted. Coming in at number 12 is a movie I actually was able to slip in just last night, and that is Mufasa the Lion King. This is the prequel to the CGI remake of The Lion King from a number of years ago. I refuse to say live action because it's not live action. And basically this is telling the story of how Mufasa and Scar met and what eventually splintered their relationship, which leads to the events of The Lion King. Now, to give credit where credit is due, I appreciate the fact that they tried to tell a new story here, because the biggest issue with the CGI remake of The Lion King was like, we know this story, we know these characters, you're doing it literally shot for shot, word for word, and it just doesn't have any of the heart, doesn't have any of the charm, any of the personality of the 1994 animated film. So what is the point here? Well, here they try to give it a point. They try to give a new story that we have not seen before. They try to tell us versions of these characters and look at them at a place in their lives that we have not seen before. And that's interesting. That's something that I was at least intrigued by. It's not necessarily a question that I needed answered, which is kind of my typical issue with prequels, but I'm interested enough to sit down and give it a shot. I'll also say that the big criticism from the Lion King remake, where they went so photorealistic with the animals that it kind of made them devoid of personality, because animals don't typically emote the way that humans and cartoon characters do. And they tweaked that a bit here. They gave them a little bit more personality in their eyes and their facial expressions, to where there is a bit more personality here. Still not on the level of an animated film, but it's better. The CGI is immaculate as it always was, and it's very impressively done. And there's moments in the movie, there's certain story moments that I enjoyed. But overall, this kind of has the same problem that I have with most prequels, which is we're doing this kind of a forced exploration of this section of the story that I wasn't asking all these questions. And the big pitfall with this movie is they try to do way too much and they lose the focus on the one piece of it that I think everybody was interested in, which is the fall of Scar and the rivalry that brews between him and Mufasa. That's the reason we're there, is to find out the answer to that question, to see that explored. Well, that's like this much of the movie. And when it actually gets to that point of the film in the third act, it feels so out of nowhere. It feels so sudden. It feels so unearned, both on Mufasa becoming like this big noble leader that everybody looks to, as well as Scar being this fucking asshole who's just so bitter and so just riddled with jealousy that he would do the most evil thing possible. It just happens on a dime. And the version of this movie where that's actually explored for the first two acts and you see things being set up and you start to see them both getting pulled in these different directions despite them being brothers and them loving each other and wanting to stay loyal to each other, that's the version I wanted, but that's just not the version that we got. So I will say that my kids really enjoyed this. My wife really enjoyed it. She said that this is probably her favorite of like the new live action Disney remakes. So take that for what it is. Some people are really enjoying this, but for me, what I would come to this thing for, I felt incredibly let down. It felt like it was a quarter measure when I wanted a full measure. Moving on to number 11 is Y2K. And this is a film that was not really on my radar until I started to hear some buzz about it after South by Southwest. My buddy Sean Chandler talked about it a bit, and it seemed like a fun concept. And then it took all the way till December to actually release. And what this is kind of like this post-apocalyptic horror comedy where on the New Year's Eve of 1999, for those that weren't alive then, there was this big scare out there that computer systems were going to all shut down and go haywire when the clock ran midnight, and all of the data in the computers that went up to year 99 would go to 00 and fuck everything up. In real life, nothing really came of it because they were able to get ahead of it. They were able to, reprogram things and put patches out there and nothing happened. But this is kind of a sci-fi horror take on what happened, where suddenly all the technology in the world becomes sentient and tries to kill off the human race. And the concept I thought was great. I thought it was fun. I enjoyed some of the nostalgia of going back to the year 1999. Sometimes that's a bit hit or miss. Sometimes I feel like the people that are making these movies weren't actually a teenager in 1999, so they focus on the wrong details. And I think that they did a pretty good job here, showing kids burning CDs and being on AOL Messenger and things like that. So that little bit of nostalgia worked for me. I thought that the humor in the movie was effective for the first act of the film, but then got progressively more of a miss throughout the second and the third act of the film. But the biggest issue with the film is that you have this situation where you have a cast of characters that are going to be the survivors we're following, and as they go through the night, they're going to be picked off, obviously, in this horror situation. And for me, they picked the complete wrong characters to kill off, because every single time a character gets killed off, it's like the most entertaining character that we're left with. And so your group of people that you're following gets less and less appealing as the movie goes on. You also have a cameo here that I mildly enjoyed. I'm not as big of a fan of this person as a lot of other people were that grew up in my era, but they also spoiled the shit out of this. I didn't realize this when I reviewed it, but I finally watched the trailer when I was editing it, and they're all over the movie. It's like, why the fuck, for a surprise like that, why would you put that in your marketing? But, that's just modern trailers nowadays. Here's the whole fucking movie in 2 minutes. Nonetheless, I thought the movie was okay. It was entertaining enough for one watch. It didn't deliver nearly as much as I wanted for this to be like a nice little surprise, a movie that I would actually like carry with me after 2024. It was just mildly entertaining by the end of it. Coming at number 10 is The Last Video Store. And this was a film that I saw last September at Fantastic Fest. And essentially what this is, it's a Canadian exploitation film where they are taking the concept of this last video store, and this girl gets a hold of this videotape that's essentially like the Necronomicon from Evil Dead. And when they play the videotape in this last video store, it brings characters out of these fake movies into their world. One of them's like a pseudo Jason Voorhees. The other one's like a pseudo Rambo. One of them's like this little creature. And so it's a very intentionally low budget and grindhousey type of film. And I think that's going to limit it for a lot of people. They're just going to see the cheapness. They're just going to see the limitations of shooting in one location and things like that. I really enjoyed the charm of that. I enjoyed the charm of the aesthetic of this video store and this really this eccentric guy that's running it, that's like the typical movie nerd that knows all of the weird sequels and all the grindhousey stuff that all the more mainstream movie fans don't. And I think that some of the stuff that happens with the characters being brought into real life was entertaining. It was kind of subversive. So it's not a movie that's going to work for a ton of people, but if that tickles your curiosity a little bit, I would say to check it out, because I was pleasantly surprised. A number of people before we went to walk into this said it was their least favorite movie of the festival, and we were like, damn, we should have watched something else. And then I was pleasantly surprised how much I actually enjoyed it compared to a lot of other people. So give it a shot. Number 9 is going to be Werewolves. This is a movie that I did not even realize was coming out until I did a trailer reaction for it. And essentially this looked like The Purge with werewolves. And that was exactly what they were going for. They did not shy away from that whatsoever. What I liked about the movie is that I think that when they use practical effects, which is predominantly what they use on these werewolves, aside from the transformation scenes, they look really good. I like the creature designs there. I think the concept of The Purge with werewolves was a great concept for a little B movie here. I love Frank Grillo, so he's always somebody that's entertaining for me. He's kind of like in that Gerard Butler kind of category, like actors that are trying to hold on to those like 90s mid-level action thrillers. And so I really dig what those types of guys do. So loved seeing him. Aside from that, though, it felt like the movie never really graduated much from that concept of let's just do the Purge anarchy, but replace the psycho killers with werewolves. So the setup was great, but I wanted more out of the execution. I kind of wanted more from the meat of the movie. And it felt like maybe budgetary restrictions or something just kept them from really going balls out with it. And also by the end of the film, without spoiling too much, they kind of had to cheat to make this big confrontation, this big climax happen in the film that kind of turned me off. It just didn't make sense in the moment. The logic of what happens before and afterwards didn't make sense for me. And the actual fight that they're cheating to make happen wasn't exciting enough to justify all of that. So it kind of left a little bit of a sour taste in my mouth in the last 5 to 10 minutes there. But overall, it was a decent movie. If you like the sound of The Purge with werewolves, if you like Frank Grillo, check it out. I know a lot of people that loved it. I know a lot of people that hated it. And a lot of people that were in the middle like me that just said, hey, that was solid enough. Give them another shot. Maybe Werewolves 2 will be a lot better. Number 8 is going to be The Order, and this is essentially The Town with neo-Nazis. You've got Jude Law here as this FBI investigator. You've got Nicholas Hoult, that is the leader of this group of neo-Nazis. You've got Ty Sheridan in here as kind of like the second in command, like one of the rookies that are working underneath Jude Law. And this is based off of a true story that happened in the 80s, where you had this group of people called the Order that were doing these terroristic acts, that were planning these huge terroristic acts. And you had these group of law enforcement that were trying to find them and take them down. Now, the description that I gave of The Town with neo-Nazis is much cooler than what the movie actually is. The movie is actually a lot more mundane and a lot more monotone, I guess, with what it's going for than what I would have liked. I think that the performances are great, especially out of Jude Law. Nicholas Hoult, I really like him, and I think he's had a great year. I don't think that he brought enough to this role for me. And some of that might just be the fact that they're bound by it being a true story. They're bound by the true events. They're bound by what actually happened and the accounts of how these people actually were. And sometimes that can really stifle the movie side of things, the fantastical side of things, the more Hollywood side of things, if they're trying to be more true to the actual story, which real life tends to be a lot more mundane than movie stories. So you have a situation where it's a movie that definitely has tension. It's a movie that is very bloody, surprisingly bloody in spots, which I really appreciated. And there's some decent action sequences here and there with the heists and shootouts. But by the end of it, it just kind of felt like it fizzled out. It kind of ended on a little more of a whimper than what would have been the more exciting version. You're going to have some people that love that, some people that love when a movie is like true to the real life tale and doesn't try to go Hollywood. And then you have people like me that love action thrillers. And I'm like, just fucking pizzazz it up a little bit. You know what I mean? Give me some explosions. Give me some shit in there that was not real life. I want to be entertained. So it's a movie that I liked, but it just doesn't have the pop to it that I hoped that it would. Number 7 is going to be Getaway, and this is a film that actually played at Fantastic Fest this year, but I didn't get a chance to see it, so I was sent a screener for it and finally checked it out about a week and a half ago. And what this is you got Nick Frost and his family that go off to this little foreign island to kind of experience the culture of this island. And as soon as they get there, everybody's very cultish and very off-putting and like very foreboding with their behavior. Like you just know, like, oh, they're going to get like sacrificed at some point. And so it's a horror comedy that kind of plays up a lot of the tropes of movies like that, like Wicker Man or something like that, where you get like this pagan, very isolated type of society that's so strange to anybody that lives in an actual society and something with some kind of law and order. And you kind of let those situations play out. And the movie really shifts itself into high gear kind of out of nowhere in the middle of the second act. And so at first I was like, this is fun. This is fine. Like I get what they're going for here. And then the second half of the movie just significantly picked up and was much more entertaining than I was expecting it. So it kind of snuck up on me a little bit. So if you love horror comedies, if you love movies like Wicker Man, Midsummer, things like that, and you want to see kind of like the horror comedy twist on that, check it out because it was very entertaining. Number 6 is going to be Better Man. This is another one that came out at Fantastic Fest. I realize I said there was only one movie from Fantastic Fest, and I'm a fucking liar. Better Man was the 4th secret screening of 5 this year. And what it is essentially, let me just pitch it to you the way that it was pitched to me when they revealed what this movie was when I'm sitting in the theater at Fantastic Fest, wondering if it's going to be something awesome and something exciting and something that I was really looking forward to. They said, this is a musical biopic of UK pop star Robbie Williams, only he is played by a CGI ape in the film. I don't think on paper you could have written a worse scenario for me to hear what I'm about to sit down and watch after I have selected my ticket for a Fantastic Fest secret screening. A musical biopic of a UK pop star I've never heard of in my life, and for reasons unexplained, he is played by a CGI ape. And somehow, the sons of bitches make it work. This is directed by the guy who made The Greatest Showman, which I still have not seen, but for people that love musicals, that's like one of the most beloved and most successful musicals that's come out in recent memory. So I imagine this guy's talents very much transfer over here because it's a very high energy, a very ambitious, a very visually interesting type of musical biopic. And I think the decision to make Robbie Williams a CGI ape for reasons that are just random. They're never explained in the movie. It's not like there's some kind of narration given for why they're doing this. You just see the movie and he's the only thing on screen that is a CGI ape. Everybody else is humans and nobody addresses the fact that he's an ape. And for as much as that sounds like so weird and pretentious and unnecessary, I think what it does is it brings this bit of sympathy and this bit of heart to a story that otherwise would have none. Like as humans, you kind of want to sympathize with the cool looking ape and the animal that we all love and associate with fun when he's telling the story of a guy who, I'll just be honest, was not a very interesting person. Like obviously he's this huge success, but it's kind of a very cliche biopic story of person gets very rich and successful and famous very young before they're able to mature and like process any of this. They turn into an absolute mess, an absolute asshole. They ruin relationships left and right. They get addicted to this, that, and the other. And by the end of it, they decide through certain events, I'm going to be a good person. And then we're going to end the movie. That's basically the story, which we've seen 1,000 times. But with having a CGI ape as the character that's going through this, it just hits a little bit different. And the music was fun. And the energy of the movie was fun. So for somebody who does not like musicals the vast majority of the time, somebody who's not a Robbie Williams fan, and somebody that when they announced this, I'm like, could you play anything else but that, please? I actually really enjoyed this. So if you're interested in this at all, if any of those things intrigue you, check it out because it was one of the bigger surprises of the year for me. Coming in at number 5 is Sonic the Hedgehog 3. And this is one that pretty much delivered exactly what I expected, like a 3.5 out of 5 star type of experience. This franchise has been an interesting little success story here, where the first trailer came out, everybody went, what the fuck is this Sonic design? And fans revolted. The studio said, okay, we hear you. And then they redesigned him, and then it's turned into, I think, easily, which is kind of sad, the most successful and the most beloved video game movie adaptation franchise that we've ever had. And so this third film was going to be continuing on the streak that we had in Sonic 2, which I highly enjoyed. Jim Carrey luckily did not retire, and he reprises his role as Robotnik and has a secondary version of Robotnik as his grandfather, so he's kind of doing double duty here. You have the introduction of the Shadow character, who is a very popular villain, a little after my era of Sonic video games, but I'm aware of who Shadow is. And if you enjoyed these movies, most people seem to think that this was the best of the trilogy. I still prefer the second one just because it provided a little bit more of what I want and a little bit more nostalgia for me personally. But 3, as far as the formula of these movies, they're definitely getting better. They're trimming back on all the human storyline that felt like a distraction and fluff, and they're putting much more emphasis on the Sonic the Hedgehog characters. Jim Carrey still going wild, doing his thing and being fantastic at it. So this is a movie that I really enjoyed seeing. My daughter loved it. There's a little tease of what's to come that just lit her up like a Christmas tree. And so I can't wait to see Sonic 4 with her, assuming that that's going to be the main focus of the movie. So if you have kids that enjoy the Sonic movies, if you're in the era that I was, that grew up on these video games, this is yet another very enjoyable movie adaptation of this franchise. Coming in at number 4 is a movie called We Live in Time. This is a drama with Andrew Garfield and Florence Pugh playing a couple where Florence Pugh has been diagnosed with a form of cancer. That's the entire premise of the film. It's not a spoiler. So the thing that's interesting about this film is that the whole thing is told out of sequence, and there's not really a rhyme or a reason, seemingly at first, to the order of events you're getting things. And it's incredibly jarring, and you're not really prepared for it. There's not like a narrative device that preps you for it. You just see a scene, and then you see another scene that doesn't seem like it fits with that one, and they look different, and their hair's different, and they're talking as if other things didn't happen, and then all of a sudden you're jumped to another scene. So that's kind of the mixed part of the movie that I think is going to make it or break it for a lot of people, is that out-of-sequence storytelling device that makes the movie feel very disjointed, like it doesn't have a narrative flow. But by the end of it, when you start to feel a little bit more of what they're actually exploring here between these two characters, as far as how somebody processes that type of situation, how somebody tries to remember their relationship and remember somebody, how somebody processes grief, and you think about how your memories come to you, your memories don't come to you in sequential order. It doesn't play like a flowing narrative. You just get these random moments that you remember, these random little snapshots in time of you with that person making breakfast, or a fight that you had, or a football game you went to, or a night that you just sat around eating ice cream and watching movies. Like, it's always out of sequence. That's like, this is 5 years ago, this is 3 years in the past, then you jump forward. And so to me, that's kind of how I ended up making sense of the structure of this film, is telling it in a way that Andrew Garfield would be remembering his wife. But with that being said, what I really enjoyed this movie the most for is Andrew Garfield and Florence Pugh have outstanding chemistry with each other, to the point where I've seen numerous little TikToks and clips of them doing interviews with each other and playing little games, and they look like the best of friends. And whenever you have that really natural, organic chemistry between two people, it translates to screen really well. And to me, that made this film that's a very depressing type of situation, a couple that is ill-fated because one of them is dying of cancer. Their charisma, their personalities, their fun dynamic with each other is what keeps the movie from being such a downer and keeps it from being such a depressing watch, because they're just so fun to watch with each other. Even during the darker times of, different scenes where things are looking a little bit more grim, they pop off of the screen. But this is a movie that I liked, and then it shot up to this list with the way that the final scene played out, which I'm not going to spoil. Not like this is a movie that really has spoilers. I mean, they tell you from the very beginning where things are going to go. You can pretty much expect narratively where things are going to head. But the thing that they decided to leave off, the very final scene, literally brought me to tears. And that doesn't happen to me very often when it doesn't have to do with father and son stuff. That's my one emotional weakness. But something that they did just rang so true for me about how you remember somebody and how they live on with you and how you keep their memory alive, that it just reminded me of how I do that with my grandmother. And I'm getting choked up talking about it right now. But the way that the movie left off, I was like, son of a bitch, you got me. I thought I was going to survive this whole thing without getting choked up, and you fuckers, right at the finish line, you got me. So this is a movie that's certainly not going to be for everybody, because the premise, we've seen so many of these types of movies, but this one is just told in a very different way, and with two outstanding lead performances that work so well with each other that I think that it pops out of the group of films that are just so much like this, but don't have nearly the heart that this one does. Coming in at number 3 is going to be a movie called Carry On, which was not on my radar. I had never heard of it, didn't know it was coming out until everybody started talking about it. And this is kind of like a throwback to the 90s Die Hard ripoffs. We had a little era there after the success of Die Hard where we had Die Hard on a bus with Speed and Die Hard on a ship with Under Siege, and you'd have Die Hard on a train with Under Siege 2, and Die Hard on a blank was like a subgenre of action thrillers in the 90s. And this is very much one of those types of things where it's like Die Hard in an airport. You have Taron Egerton, who's a TSA agent. You have Jason Bateman, who is this terrorist who is trying to get this device that's in a suitcase through TSA and onto an airplane. And so he essentially has to take siege of Taron Egerton's life to force him to let them bypass the security. And, it's about the pull and tug of him trying to battle against that while also being pushed into a corner and having to comply with this. I think that both of the lead performances are great. And for a streaming service movie, it's certainly one of the best ones that I've seen all year round. It's not outstanding. It's not on the level of Die Hard. It's not on the level of even some of the Die Hard ripoffs from the 90s. But for a little throwback action thriller with two really good performances, I had a great time with this one, and it comes up here into the top 3 of the month of December. Number 2 is one of the last movies that I watched over the past couple of days, and that is A Real Pain. And this is a film that was written and directed and stars Jesse Eisenberg, and it also stars Kieran Culkin. And it tells the story of Jesse and Kieran, who are playing these cousins whose grandmother has passed away in Poland. And, they're two Jews who are going to Poland, and they essentially go on this little tour guide through Poland that's going through all of the World War II stuff. And they're working out their issues, remembering their grandma, kind of paying respects to their heritage and things like that. But it's a movie that is completely hinged on the two lead performances. You have Kieran Culkin, who gives the best performance I've ever seen him give with his character here. He's kind of like the more free-spirited, the guy that talks and is a little bit too honest and very carefree. And then you have Jesse Eisenberg, as you can expect, that plays the much more neurotic and reserved of the two, who's a family man that doesn't like to take risks, that doesn't like being in uncomfortable situations, that doesn't want to rock the boat. And it's, as you can expect, a movie where those two personalities kind of battle it out a little bit and push the other to change and to adjust how their typical day-to-day selves are. And even Jesse Eisenberg, for a lot of the film, I was like, he's just kind of doing the Jesse Eisenberg thing. And there comes a point where he has to really deliver emotionally. And I was like, damn, aside from maybe Social Network, this might be the best performance I've seen him give. So it's a movie that I don't know if I'd ever rewatch again, which is typical for a lot of these more awards-worthy type films that you get at the end of the year. But it's one that I really enjoyed watching because of the two performances, because of a lot of really solid humor that comes through with them, very funny situations. And they sneak in a good bit of heart in there with two people that are on just different paths in life that, as family tends to do, you come together and you're like, look, I don't understand you. You're a totally different person than me, but I love you, and I don't ever really want you to change. So it's a movie that I really enjoyed by the end of it. But coming in at number 1 by a landslide, by a country mile, the best movie I saw in the month of December was Nosferatu. Notice how I said Nosferatu there. I don't want to get in trouble anymore for saying Nosferatu. God forbid those of us that grew up in the SpongeBob era mispronounce the fucking name and end up on Reddit threads.
No! Nosferatu! What did he say?
So I said Nosferatu, so I don't hurt your little stupid ears again. Nosferatu is the newest Robert Eggers film. And Robert Eggers is a very hit or miss type of director for me. I think that he's fantastic at what he does, but the types of movies that he makes aren't necessarily on my wavelength sometimes. I really appreciate The Witch. The Lighthouse was not for me whatsoever, and I thought that The Northman was pretty awesome. So I was looking forward to this, but I was curious what type of Robert Eggers we were going to get. And to me, I think this is his best film. This is the film that he has made that I enjoy the most. And I actually had to watch it twice to kind of fully grasp how I felt about it. On first watch, I was very much just like busy, trying to squeeze things in, tired, watched it. It delivered kind of what I expected. And so I was like, like it's shot well, it's great. Like all that stuff's great. I just don't know if I love it. But I was just kind of unconfident. I was not confident in my opinion on it enough to review it. So I decided to watch it again the very next day and have no distractions, not have anything else on my plate, and just dial into the movie. And I was able to follow the plot a lot more. I watched it with subtitles because Robert Eggers loves that very old style of talking. And so I missed a lot of what was going on just because I don't recognize these phrases. Like instead of sunrise, they say the first crow of cock. Anyway, second watch, I enjoyed the film significantly more than the first watch. And what I love about the movie is that I genuinely think visually it's a masterpiece. I don't throw that word around because I feel like people throw it around way too willy-nilly nowadays. But as far as visual storytelling, the cinematography, the specific shots, the dreamlike quality, the color grading that is very aesthetically similar to a black and white film without actually fully going there, the atmosphere that is created, the tone that is created with the images, I think he does an immaculate job, him and his crew. So that's it's the most visually stunning movie that I've seen all year round. And the shot where Nosferatu, Count Orlok, actually arrives in the town and you see the shadow of his hand just kind of painting over the town. That's my favorite shot of 2024. I thought that was awesome. And there's numerous shots in the movies that use shadows in that way that I thought was awesome. I also think the movie is very unnerving. I wouldn't necessarily call it scary. You know, we all have our different criteria for what we call scary. Some people think this is terrifying. For me, it's just unnerving. It's got this impending doom painted throughout the entire film that is very palpable. Performance-wise, everybody knocks it out of the park. I think that Nicholas Hoult is outstanding. I think that Willem Dafoe, yet again, he's somebody that regularly collaborates with Robert Eggers and always does a fantastic job. He's kind of playing a version of Van Helsing here. And then you have the two standouts, which is, of course, Bill Skarsgård as Count Orlok, where when people say he is unrecognizable, they're actually like underselling it. It's to the point where if I did not tell you that was Bill Skarsgård and just let you watch the movie, I bet you $1,000 you would not guess that is Bill Skarsgård, and I sure as shit wouldn't. Like, this is not Pennywise in a vampire garb. He is under makeup and a creature design that physically is impossible to tell what actor is underneath it, just totally escapes into the role, and his voice is unlike anything you have ever heard him do. And he had to work with opera singers and different trainers to like discover how to get voices from different parts of his chest and drop it like significantly down in the octave scale. So even just the way that he talks, you're like, that ain't Bill Skarsgård. Who the fuck is that? So he was incredible. But the star of the show, the woman who, if anybody gets award consideration, which this movie's probably fucked when it comes to that because they decided to release it on December 25th, is Lily Rose Depp, who I have not seen do very much. The only things I've ever heard of the things that she's picked has been terrible. Like, she was in a show not too long ago that was lambasted. She was in Yoga Hosers, which most people say is Kevin Smith's worst film. But here, she makes a name for herself because she is required to do so many things as an actress, so much like physical contortions and rolling her eyes in the back of her skull and like, you know, doing these things with her body where she actually had to work with contortionists and people to like figure out how to physically do that, where all of that plus the emotional side of things, she is very much kind of the protagonist here. The story kind of focuses on her and this lust draw that she has with Nosferatu, that she could be the best performance of the year. I mean, I have a hard time not giving that credit to Mikey Madison or to Demi Moore just because I love what they do so much. But those three, man, like if you could give away 3 awards, give it to all 3 of them because holy shit. But I really ended up loving what this movie does. It's not necessarily a film that I see myself rewatching very much. This is not the genre type of vampire flick that I just fall in love with and watch continuously like Lost Boys or Fright Night or even like Abigail that came out this year. But as far as the more classical approach, the more film auteur type approach to vampire films, as far as adaptations of the original Bram Stoker Dracula storyline, this is my favorite version of that type of film. So, yes, it ended up being not only my favorite film of December, but it's guaranteed to be in my top 10 of the year. How high it will get, we will find out here in about a week or so. But easily the best film of December 2024 for me was Robert Eggers' Nosferatu. Well, that's it for this one, guys. If you enjoyed that, click over here for a playlist of all of the new release reviews that I did in the year of 2024, as well as all of the month wrap-up videos I did in 2024 as we prepare for a new year and all of my end-of-the-year content. So please like, share, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any of that. And as always, remember, opinions are like assholes, but that doesn't mean you have to be.